Right. Well, we're going to make a pivot here to our next speaker. And again, we'll have an opportunity to review these obstacles together and see how would we prioritize them so that we can get to focus. So let me just regroup here. Here we go. All right. Next, I'm very excited to introduce Lisa Brown, Senior Director, Local Government for Johnson Controls. She's been a wonderful support on our steering committee in terms of developing the agenda and approach to this conference. And Lisa, I'm so glad that you can be here, and I'm grateful that several members of your team have been here as well. So welcome. And I am just going to slip this right here. Perfect.
I like your keyboard. Good morning. Can you all hear me?
It'll come through here.
Oh, wonderful. I have a loud Brooklyn voice, so I'm assuming usually everyone can hear me. Good morning. And it's a delight to be here. I want to thank my colleagues Jesse and Mariela, and I don't know if Francisco has joined us, but we are so excited, and thank you to HG and to Jess and to Hema and everyone at AEG. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to all get together. I will say that yesterday I was delighted there was so much overlap, because that means that there was this alignment, and I loved the competitive nature. I was actually watching those numbers over and over thinking, how could I get table 8 to be at the top? But I was so excited that we all came together. So that whole concept of collaboration really did ring true even with our actions. So I will also say that there will be some definite overlap in this conversation as well. As the global lead for municipal infrastructure and smart cities for Johnson Controls, I've had a real luxury, a real honor to be in different regions and in different states and countries and seen real inspiration and beauty and innovation. And I've also seen a lot of destruction and a lot of natural disasters and others. And I do have the opportunity to speak on a pretty consistent basis. So I will tell you, as a native New Yorker, I do feel, even though I'm not from Puerto Rico, I feel like I might have had more neighbors from Puerto Rico than some of you folks who actually live here. And I've always said in the last year, please keep the people of Puerto Rico in your prayers. If you are religious individuals, when I'm speaking at conferences, I ask them whoever their spiritual leader is. The people of Puerto Rico have taken so many body shots, and there needs to be some more smiling. God needs to smile more on the people of Puerto Rico. So I believe that hopefully HG and his team has brought us together to help God smile a little bit more. So with that, you know, we also, I will say just a quick thing for Johnson Controls, we've been in the smart buildings space for many, many decades. And before the pandemic, it was about smart buildings. And during the pandemic, it was about safe and healthy buildings. Make my buildings safer and healthier. Help me with access control. Let's bring that confidence back to citizens and constituents and business owners to use their building and their municipal assets. Now, during the recovery, it's more about how do you help me, and it goes along with what Shalanda said as well as Manuel, how do you help me be more connected and resilient? And so being a bit of a data nerd, I was interested in the definitions. And again, I said that I'd been kind of an OG of smart cities, and that definition of what a smart city was. At one point, my colleague and I did a little research, and we had 29 different definitions of what a smart city was. So we threw out that list, because what's the point? I think resiliency is very similar, the different definitions of what resiliency is. And so I went out, and based on all the work we're doing in the World Economic Forum and how the Biden administration is coming out with all the building performance standards and how the mayors are committing to these different standards and these net zero and carbon mandates and how everybody is approaching it. Puerto Rico with their PR 100, I was delighted to see that last Wednesday coming out. I wanted to have a firm understanding of what sustainability meant and what resiliency meant. So I started with sustainability. And I reached out with the World Economic Forum to about 100 different mayors, city managers, county commissioners, kind of kept it North America at that point. And it was interesting to see how they defined it, and they broke it, and I'm happy to share that research with anyone who's interested, just a couple slides, where they broke sustainability into two pieces, sustainability and then social sustainability. And the interesting thing about how they broke that out is they considered homelessness and childcare and workforce being part of that social sustainability. And then they broke out resiliency, and they said, well, so sustainability is a nice to have, and we're hearing about it so much in the media and all the work we're doing, but resiliency was the word they really said was the priority. And the resiliency is the way they defined workforce enhancement and lifting up local labor force. So everybody that was in the room yesterday, we're on the right track to resiliency. Pandemic and crisis response. One of those little things that really gets me is when people say, I want to future-ready things, future-ready my assets, future-ready my infrastructure. I don't believe there is such a thing as future-proof, but readying it is the way I think that we're working on it, so that's important. Resiliency was microgrids. They reported that it was workforce enhancement, it was pandemic and crisis response, getting ready for that next Maria, as Manuel mentioned. So just a quick piece. My obstacle is going to be about building infrastructure. All the relief and stimulus, as we've all discussed before, I think there's a real need to deal with the demand before we deal with the supply. So the UN and the World Economic Forum mentioned that 40% of your carbon journey or your carbon reduction journey can be satisfied if you just upgrade your buildings and the systems in your buildings. So I'm always going to focus on buildings first, makes a real impact, and then moving on to the next. So the root problems, I think they're very similar that everyone else has been talking about financially. There's people leaving. How do we get people to come back? And when people leave, tax revenues go down, and that's a challenge. And we've talked about also the financial challenges as well. Just getting things financed here in Puerto Rico has always been a challenge. Our office has been here for 50 years, and we've been going through times where the money was there, times when the money wasn't there, times when the banks were here and they were vibrant, times when the banks went away and they didn't want to lend. So financial challenges have always been here on the island. Natural disasters and pandemic changes, as we mentioned. Space utilization has changed. The world is now virtual in terms of the way we work, live, and serve. So individuals can live and work and serve wherever they want. They don't need to be near the buildings anymore. So that's also affecting building owners and operators, et cetera. And then deferred maintenance, that's a picture of a roof of a city hall building here on the island. I won't say where, because I don't want to point at anyone, but there's deferred maintenance issues. And there's also resources, and folks have mentioned this yesterday and even this morning, we need a shift in skill expertise. Root causes, very similar to what has been already discussed. Investment costs and the return on investment, it really varies. It's very subjective based on who's involved in that discussion. Building back better, I think that we have seen from FEMA and the money that's coming in from the DR and the MIT, it's fine to actually build, but you can't build back to what it was. And I know that FEMA has done that historically. And I believe it was the BRIC program that they had was building resiliency back into the infrastructure, and that's something we need to focus on. So ensuring that we're building for the future and that we're building with that, I think whoever said the traditional and the new energy sources, they need to be combined and aligned. And then resource restraints. Tonight we're going to be talking about that as well. It's a delight that HG and Francisco had the idea to bring together what we call the job gala, and then we switched over to a lot of collaboration so that companies can work together. I know that my table 8, again I'll say, I think I'm paid every time I say the word table 8. We all decided that we were going to be stakeholders and collaborative partners in the next project. And so I think a lot of people in this room, we should be able to combine together and work. But ensuring that the right labor force is here and to ensure that we keep them here. Wouldn't it be beautiful if we could rebrand Puerto Rico as the next innovation hub, or the place where all the technology accelerators and opportunities would thrive and get people to come here that have never been here before and to live and to raise their families. So we talked about the consequences and the benefits as well. I won't go into all of this. At the end of the day, it's to build economic vibrancy back into the island. Just a quick case study. We've been working, as I said, many years, but just a couple of the benefits of some of the work we did at Fort Buchanan as well as with the Army National Guard. Look at the jobs. And I will say, I have, again, the luxury to work with mayors all over the country and the world, municipal leaders, and they don't often talk about the energy that was saved. They don't often talk about the technology or the equipment they bought, but they talk about the jobs that were created. And they talk about how people's lives were impacted. So 1,000 jobs were positively impacted. We were proud to say that we got the energy and promptly power restored back in Maria. And that's something that Johnson Controls is very proud of. We deal with a lot of disasters around the world, and that's something that, that I think is very important, and the savings that are there as well. So the obstacle statement, if you couldn't tell by now, is going to be regarding critical infrastructure to achieve clean energy, equity, and resilience objectives. A critical obstacle is to collaboratively, and I'm putting in my ecosystem partners, whoever they are, to overcome is to create secure, connected, and sustainable or resilient public building infrastructure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very well done. Thank you.
All right, I'm excited to bring up next Kishia Powell. As I mentioned earlier, she's Chief Operating Officer, Executive Vice President for DC Water. She's also President of NACWA, and I'm so grateful that you're here. It's so fun to have leaders coming from our different AEG cities willing to support and enrich this dialogue. So Washington, D.C. is represented today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, HG. It is such a pleasure to be here. I was in space on the podium for my without messing anything up. So, thank you.
Oh, and I have this for you. If you'll take this for me. Let me just give this. If I can, I'm going to go right here on your. That should just work perfect.
Okay, brilliant. Good morning, everyone. As I said, it's great to be here from Washington, D.C., and to see so many new faces and to certainly be here in person. I want to thank you, HG and Jess, for continuing to work with our team over this last year. When you talk about winning, we feel we are, and that's in large part because of the format that we had an opportunity to participate in with this challenge. And to be here and hear the speakers before myself and to hear about the discussions yesterday, I think that gives us more food for thought on how we can continue to grow as we continue our efforts to now start implementing what we have developed. Before I go on, I want to take a moment of personal privilege to recognize Opera Nora, who is our Director of Government Affairs, Policy and Government Affairs with DC Water. And I also want to recognize mi madre, who is here conmigo. She's in the back, so I have to recognize her. Brilliant. So for those that are not familiar, as HG said, first of all, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DC Water, which is the regional utility for the nation's capital. We also serve outside of the District of Columbia water and wastewater services. We're a regional wastewater utility, having the largest advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world. I'm also president of the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, who I'm actually representing at this conference and conveying to you what we've done at DC Water. But I'm representing NACWA because we have had the recognition, especially over the last several years, that there is a significant nexus between clean energy and clean water. And as a clean water utility primarily, we are now in a position where we have for years worked on solutions to adapt to climate change, and now our focus is on mitigating climate change, and I'll talk about how we're doing that. But so many of the wastewater utilities across the U.S. and including in Puerto Rico, we've been engaged in discussions with PRASA, have the opportunity to really leverage what becomes crisis to build back better. And as the administration has been talking about, the focus of the bipartisan infrastructure law hasn't just been getting funding out there to do projects, but the focus wasn't on shovel-ready projects for a reason. The focus has been on how do we use this significant funding opportunity for the water sector, $55 billion, which is more than we've ever received in infrastructure funding ever. Use this as an opportunity to think about how we rebuild infrastructure really in every city in the U.S., because we've never had this much cash infusion, to modernize our water and wastewater infrastructure. At the same time, we're providing other benefits for our communities. And that, I believe, is the tie to the environmental justice and the equity, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. So for those that are not familiar with DC Water, we're actually as I said, a regional utility serving 2.2 million residents in the District of Columbia. So we have the pipes, the pump stations, and again, the largest advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world. But when we first did the challenge, I introduced us from the frame of being the single largest power consumer in the District of Columbia. Many don't know that 4% of the power consumed in the U.S. is consumed by water and wastewater utilities. Significant amount of power. And conversely, 40% of our budgets is usually spent on power because we've got to move water, which is very difficult to do without power and pump stations. And having the largest advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world means that we have a lot of wastewater that we've got to move and process. All of our processes are power intensive. So that makes us ripe for the opportunity to look at alternatives that will make us more reliable and more resilient. In addition to being the single largest power consumer in the district, we also have the most opportunity to introduce green energy into our operation, but in a way that benefits the communities that we serve. So we've already developed a 13 megawatt on-site combined heat and power facility, which uses the biogas from our treatment process. We've also introduced solar projects at our treatment plant. We're now starting to build outside of the fence line of our treatment plant at some of our reservoirs. We're also entertaining floating solar panels on some of the reservoirs and not just the property itself. We're looking to partner with others to introduce solar. And these projects are important because there is a program in the district that allows us to offset the energy burden from some of the residents through a Solar for All program, the more solar projects we do. So again, we're meeting multiple objectives with the work that we're doing. We also have an opportunity to source heat from our sewer system. So we have a significant amount of potential there, which we are the only entity in the district that has that opportunity. We also have an opportunity to partner with others to collect food waste for co-digestion, which would create more clean energy potential. And then we have the opportunity to do a microgrid at our wastewater treatment plant, which would again extend an opportunity to communities that are around us. But as we think about this, one of the things that's been most important to us is to frame it in the context of equity, and specifically water equity. We define water equity as occurring when all communities have access to safe, clean, affordable drinking water and wastewater services, making sure that all communities are resilient in the face of climate change, particularly those communities of color that are most physically and economically vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and making sure that all communities have an opportunity to share in the economic, social, and environmental benefits of the water systems and the work that we're doing, and having a role in the decision making. So I think about the question that HG posed earlier from the discussion this morning and the discussions yesterday about how to get in front of the message. And one of the things that we've been working on is making sure that we are engaging the community up front and not bringing to them a fully baked solution. So the task force that we've been engaged in has included 12 stakeholders, including DC Water. It's included the Green Bank, somehow someone from the state of Illinois, that far away. WSP has been a stakeholder, our local power company, Pepco, and Washington Gas. And then we've had some other stakeholders as well. But we also consider the community themselves as stakeholders. When we talk about equity, equity is about driving outcomes and not just the output of the projects. And the community has to be in a position of saying what they believe they need to stand on equal footing. We recognize that every community doesn't need the same thing, and I think someone talked earlier about the differences in needs here in Puerto Rico. So it's imperative that we make sure that they are part of the discussion from the very beginning. Some of the challenges and opportunities that we've identified, which I think I've heard here this morning regarding Puerto Rico, is that we're expecting to see more significant precipitation events and urban flooding as a result of climate change. In turn, that means that it will continue to impact those communities, again, that are most physically and economically vulnerable. But how do we keep that from happening? We have to make sure that we have solutions that are tailored to the communities and the issues that they're experiencing. We have opportunities for decarbonization that, quite frankly, are exceeding our available funding. Most of our funding is going into critical infrastructure that needs upgrades and repairs. So how do we get this done and move in the direction that Mr. Laboy talked about this morning, having a more sustainable, resilient, and reliable power system to serve our operations? And as a water utility, our project opportunities to decarbonize are outweighed by those needs to invest in other critical infrastructure. But the opportunities, again, that we have are being able to access a large carbon source that can be converted to energy, allowing access to land to site projects with other partners. We have a $6.4 billion now capital improvement program of projects that we can leverage. And we serve as the public entity. We can serve as the public entity in public-private partnerships to leverage other funding programs besides ratepayer funds. Now, over the last year, this 12-year period, DC Water's task force has been focused on developing a project portfolio of opportunities, which we then prioritize by carbon reduction, equity, and resilience goals. We took a step back, and I can tell you that the engineers that I work with, our team at DC Water has been raring to go to deliver some of these projects really for years. These are not new opportunities, brand new opportunities that have been identified. They've just sat unfunded because of other priorities. But when we entered this process, we said, we need to take a step back first to make sure that we do this right. And I think we heard Mr. Laboy say that. not only from a compliance standpoint, but also to make sure that we leverage every opportunity that we have to be more resilient in the future, to make sure that we're doing projects that will make our systems more reliable, but to also make sure that we drive equity. And in order to do that, we have to then know what is equity, what will drive equity, what will make us more resilient, how will we get the most bang for the buck, or that cost benefit that Mr. Laboy talked about in terms of the carbon reduction and meeting the district's carbon goals. So the team focused on not only developing or finalizing a portfolio of projects, because we have 5 subcommittees, one that was focused just on projects and funding, but one that was focused on equity, one that was focused on the carbon emissions, and then another that was focused on stakeholder engagement and community, and then a final subcommittee focused on the policy and legislative measures or obstacles that we would need to remove, to then assign scores focused on, that were based on value and effort. The value score itself, and I'll flip over to the scoring methodology, but the value tools that the team developed were for carbon reduction, meeting the district's carbon goal, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2006, by 50% of 2006 levels by 2032, a mouthful, and to be fully carbon neutral by 2050. But the value tools identified or allowed us to score the projects based on the amount of carbon avoidance, looking at how resilient those projects would make us. So it measures the community and infrastructure resilience related to those projects. And then from an equity perspective, looking at inclusion, we wanted to make sure that small, disadvantaged, minority, and women-owned businesses have an opportunity to participate in the implementation of the projects. We also wanted to make sure that the projects, where they can, help to reduce the utility burden on our customers, both from a water, wastewater affordability perspective, as well as the energy burden on communities. And then again, building community resilience and community sustainability. And then the effort tool looked at how difficult is it to implement these projects. Are we going to spend a tremendous amount of effort to implement a project that is going to have very little benefit from an equity perspective, and vice versa? It also helped us think about how to align these projects with potential funding sources. So now that we have gone through a 12-month period of developing the portfolio, getting these projects prioritized, understanding not only what the output of the projects will be, but also what outcomes we want to drive, we're now at a point where we're ready to implement, and we're starting to have more discussions about how to fund the projects, and make sure, and putting a strategy in place that allows us to fund projects up front that will have economic benefits, alternative revenue sources that we can then cascade and leverage and implement additional projects, or present the portfolio to funders to fund the portfolio as a system of projects. But for our challenge statement regarding critical infrastructure to achieve clean energy, equity, and resilience objectives, a critical obstacle for us to now overcome collaboratively is how to fund this portfolio. And I see from the discussions this morning that there is a tremendous opportunity to collaborate with Puerto Rico and certainly PRASA as we continue to look for funding opportunities and build out this implementation methodology to make sure that we're not only getting the important work done, but we're using these opportunities to collaborate and integrate solutions that will most benefit the communities and make our infrastructure most reliable and resilient for the future. Thank you. What is that?
So you may wonder what this little device here is. I've heard people ask. So this is going to enable us. We do a podcast series. And first, if you haven't done it, I encourage you and invite you to go to LinkedIn and find Advanced Energy Group on LinkedIn. Follow the group, because the point of why I created the LinkedIn page was to have this dialogue grow. And you know this format now. This format is what we're using in these cities. So it gives you an opportunity to speak a similar language on obstacle prioritization, task force engagement. You could see a task force, say this one in DC Water, that's intriguing to a project that you're working on and want to get engaged. Like I can tell you now, there's nearly 4 cities working on intermodal EV hubs that become strategic locations with private kind of base anchor clients willing to have the space to connect with public transit EV hubs that then can relate to multifamily needs. And we're looking at how do you best apply these intermodal hubs across large cities. That could be something, for instance, for DTOP to know more about as they think about how they want to plan, or for LUMA. So recommend going to Advanced Energy Group and following the AEG site. It'll be where you can maintain a conversation together. That's also where we'll post the link to SoundCloud, where we have all these podcasts. So they're 8-10 minutes long. They talk about a critical obstacle, and you can have it on in the background and inform yourself on what are the critical obstacles on grid modernization across 4 cities, right? Year over year for 3 years. You could really follow that progression. All right. I want to get to one more speaker, and then we're going to open it up and hear how do you prioritize the obstacles that we've heard so far. Our speaker is David Owens. He's the vice chair for PREPA. Welcome. David, so glad you could be here with us. Thank you. You'll just push this arrow here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Put this right here.
Is that me? Just kidding. Thank you for this opportunity. As was mentioned, I am the vice chair of PREPA, and I've got a very long career, and I would say that being the vice chair of PREPA has been probably the most challenging opportunity that I've had in my entire career. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Okay? So I'm going to put this in context. So back in 2011, we had a major storm that hit 27 states. It was called Superstorm Sandy. And Superstorm Sandy resulted in roughly 10 to 11 million people not having electricity. I was the executive vice president of the Edison Electric Institute. One of my responsibilities was a program called Mutual Assistance. There were all kinds of information that was coming out about the storm. The information was not consistent. And we reached out to the Department of Energy, worked with President Obama, Homeland Security, a lot of other agencies. Because one of our biggest fears in the midst of this major storm was a cyber disruption. We were very worried. I was detailed to go over to FEMA, and I got to know FEMA very well. We would have briefings every day, and we were all very, very concerned about New York City. If you bring down our financial community, you bring down America. Now, we have backup resources, Con Ed, the utility serves New York, but still there was this compelling concern. 27 surrounding states with a blackout. How do you mobilize what we call mutual assistance crews to come from other parts of the nation to help us out? Well, you got a bottleneck. I believe that extraordinary challenges lead to extraordinary decisions. So little old David Owens is in the meeting with all these generals. I'm the only non-officer. And I said, let's take bucket trucks from the West Coast and move them to the East Coast. Let's put them on C-15s and let's mobilize them and get them to the East Coast so that we can restore electricity. Moreover, we all said, you need staging areas. Let's put them on military bases. Extraordinary challenges create extraordinary decisions. Well, I retired from EEI in June of 2017. There's one other issue relating to this that provides context for, and I'm going to go much quicker with my remarks. So this experience in Superstorm Sandy, as I mentioned, brought together the Department of Energy, brought together FEMA, brought together public utilities, brought together private utilities. It created a collaborative. And what else did it do? Every day we had calls and we shared information. So we gave the public one consistent message. What the problems were when service would be restored. We coordinated. We spoke with a single voice. Okay? Very, very important. And we yielded to one another's expertise. We felt that was very important. The commander-in-chief was in charge, but he orchestrated this dialogue. What's the outcome of that? A group called the Electric Systems Coordination Council, which pulled together utilities throughout the world, including PREPA, public utilities, private utilities, government utilities, and they coordinate. They do exercises. They speak frequently in order to what? Protect reliability and resiliency. I was also, when I said retired in June of 2017, it felt good. I didn't have to get up early in the morning. And then in September, I got this call from a close friend, a mentor, retired CEO, who said, David, so who in the world is calling me at 6 a.m. in the morning? I need you. I could have mentioned this individual's name, but he was on the PREPA board. We need you here in Puerto Rico. Need you to help out. I said, man, I'm retired. We need you. He said, moreover, we need you to bring a team of people not only to help with the mutual assistance, but also to help us transform the electric system. So you need to create a team, and we're going to announce it on Friday. This is a Wednesday. The team of people you're going to bring. So I put on my thinking cap, and I pulled a major person from Hawaii who know all about renewables. I pulled the retired CEO from PJM. I pulled the head of the utility, the CFO of the utility in New York, public utility. I pulled a co-op CEO. I pulled a range of people with different backgrounds that could provide expertise. I pulled a retired CEO who was an expert in bankruptcy. So we created a team. And we call that team the Transformation Advisory Council. And I was the chair of that team. We would give advice to the governor of Puerto Rico, and we would give advice to PREPA. When I came to Puerto Rico, it was devastating, folks, in 2017. You lived it. I saw old generating plants. I saw no vegetation management. It was ridiculous. I've never seen an electric system look this way. I just shuddered. I said, no investment in infrastructure? No upgrading of baseload plants? No conversion from oil? Two major 230 kV ties to connect the north to the south in parallel? Vegetation all around them and the ties went down? I walked down streets, wires every place. Said, this is ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Well, what happened was, David, let's move you from an advisor to a decision maker. Acts 17 said, let's move the PREPA board from being political and let's put 4 independent directors on the PREPA board. I was one of those independent directors. I know you can see from my personality, I'm not shy. So I have been on PREPA for close to 4 years, and the challenges are insurmountable. So what are we doing? We've given a third party, Luma, who's doing a superb job. I looked at the T&D system, I said, oh my gosh. Luma's doing a superb job. 15-year operating and maintenance agreement. They're running the grid. They're taking a $9.5 billion that FEMA has provided, and they're making the grid much more resilient, much more reliable. They're modernizing the grid. They're digitizing the grid. They're making it so you can integrate renewables. They're making it so you have visibility, control, and cooperation. If you're a utility, you need to know what's happening on that electric system. And that's what they're doing. I said old oil-fired plants. So what does the Integrated Resource Plan from PREB do? It says 40% renewables by 2025. And what did it say to PREPA? Integrated Resource Plan, you start out with 1,000 megawatts of renewables and 500 megawatts of battery backup by 2025. We want to have 3,750 megawatts of renewables and 1,500 megawatts of battery backup. So we just completed Tranche 1 with 1,000 megawatts of renewables, 500 megawatts of energy storage. And we're moving to Tranche 2. So we're going to transform Puerto Rico to renewables aggressively. But we're also going to do something that we've done with Luma. We're going to have a private operator take our legacy generating plants and operate them. We're going to have some of those plants upgraded so they burn natural gas, such as San Juan 5 and 6. You have to transition from where you are if you're trying to get the renewables. And that's what we're doing. We're working with all the government agencies. It's very, very important. We listen to the PREB. We want to be financial. We want to have fiscal security, so we got to listen to the FOMB. We have to listen to P3, who is the intermediary overseeing a lot of this. That's what we're doing. See, much of what is happening is driven by public policy, is driven by technology, and it's driven by changing customer needs and expectations. And that's what this is showing. Customers in Puerto Rico want clean energy. They want lower rates. They want freedom of choice. And that's what we're trying to do, to transform the electric system. So there's increased reliability, enhanced resiliency, cleaner energy, affordable energy, and we're empowering the consumers. Critical challenges create critical decision making. Our biggest obstacle, in my opinion, is PREPA's bankruptcy. Now you tell me how you do this. How do you convert an electric system with old oil-fired plants to renewables? How do you increase your ability to go to capital markets by making sure those who made investments in your system, bondholders, and years ago there were 11,000 employees at PREPA. Recently they're below 4,000. People retired. How do you pay for the retirement? How do you pay the bondholders? And how do you do it without increasing rates? I don't know about all of that. We have something called the Restructuring Service Agreement. It is controversial because what does it say? It says, whatever your energy costs are today, we're going to have to put a little bit more on those so that we can pay the bondholders and pay the retirees. That's very unpopular. So that's our challenge. How do we create a transform electric system which is clean? How do we create an electric system which is affordable? How do we create an electric system that has the best technology in existence? And how do we pay bondholders and retirees without raising rates? I don't know. We need help. Thank you.
All right, well, it's time for us to get to work. We're going to look at these obstacle statements, and we're going to get into a discussion over how do we start prioritizing them. This afternoon, when we come back, we're going to get back in the discussion and hear a couple more perspectives, and then we'll do some teamwork at the tables, and I'm going to have a way to switch up the tables this afternoon, so you'll get to work together with a new set. But what you'll do when we come back after lunch is come back to your table that you have on your badge, and then from there I'll have a way for you to move and shake it up a little bit in the room. So let's get back to Slido. Let's review these obstacle statements that we heard. And so if you remember how that works, you go ahead and if you